Jeff, you need to arrest this man for over-exaggerating my importance here and my past background.
I don't think he said enough.
Thank you very much, Daryl, Mr. Bowman. I hope this is the first of many such stations here in Lawrence County where we perpetuate the memory of our community and our athletic prowess within those schools in that community. I've always been disturbed since I came here in 1980 that no one ever cared enough to have a Lawrence County history taught here, either in the high schools or in the colleges in this area here. I proposed that, and our kids don't know what happened then. But then, I don't know if there are any experts on the Waterloo Wonders still alive. It was 86 years ago when they captured their first state tournament. I am deeply indebted to Jimmy Walker. As I told him a while ago, if I hadn't read his articles, I wouldn't have anything to say. Mrs. Georgia Triplett, Dwayne Naw, and Frank Jenkins, my barber, who went in messing up my hair, telling me stories about the Wonders, you know. I gleaned some things from him. I'd like to read something to you here that shows the pride of what Waterloo High School Academics of Basketball was. A basket, a basket, a basket, boys. You make the basket, we'll make the noise. Yay black, yay white, yay team, win tonight. That may sound corny to some people, but that was the school cheer, the school motto of Waterloo High School. And he had two cheerleaders, Catherine Bradshaw McMahon and Blanche Vermillion Spears. But they had something else, and maybe some of you have heard of this man or seen him, I haven't. They had a Civil War veteran named Perry Brumfield. They called him Uncle Perry. This man was born in 1847 when James Knox Polk was the president. He died at age 97. But let me tell you something. Every community has someone who gets the local crowd fired up, like a Rusty White from Ironton, or Rich Unruh from Fairland. But we had Perry Brumfield out here. This man would run through the crowd and yell and scream and cheer. And when he was 84 years old, he climbed the flagpole at Remotus Cemetery here in this area. But the thing's amazing about him, when the Waterloo Wonders went barnstorming, he went with them. And what he would do, he would get out the center circle out there after the game and dance for the crowd. The crowd would stay and watch him dance. And it wasn't one of these raise your leg and let the pain subside. He put on a show, clicking those heels on those gymnasium floors. So Perry Brumfield also enlightened the Waterloo Wonders by going to the general store and refighting the Civil War, especially the Battle of Cedar Creek in October of 1864. But he was a catalyst within the crowd itself. Now this cheer says something about making noise. Well, I remember when they played for the state championship at the Fairgrounds Coliseum in Columbus. It's supposed to seat 7,500 people. Well, there were 8,400 there to see them because they were the Wonders. But they turned some people away, 500 of them. They had fire alarms and things like that. Those people tore the doors down off the building. The police and officials were helpless. They couldn't stop them. And they came in, stood in the aisles, and watched the game. Nearly 9,000 people. I'd say there was some noise there that night. Well, I want to say unequivocally, I'm not an expert on Waterloo or the Wonders at all, but I did play against them one time in Ironton in a charity game, and I feel so guilty about that right now because we played according to our rules, not theirs. We had no jump ball after every basket at that time. And I was playing Rye Green at the time, and I was 6'6", and I blocked a couple shots and got the rebounds, but I learned one thing about the Waterloo Wonders that day. Don't put your fingers or your hands or your head out in their passing lanes, or you'll be in the emergency room in Lawrence County General Hospital. Those guys fired that ball around. I think there are three things they did that maybe no other teams have done in the high school scholastic sports. Of course, number one was for passing, and I'll explain why that occurred here momentarily. Their passing was phenomenal, but there was a reason for that. Their ball handling was pre-Globetrotter. Some of the passes they made there, the Globetrotters would do later. The Globetrotters were not known at that time as tricksters in basketball. They were just starting the beginnings. And then their shooting. I just cannot believe when they played in the gold medal tournament at New Boston, Ohio, that one of the Wonders was given the ball. He dribbled out an exit door down the hall, stopped and talked to the ticket seller there, came in, dribbled across the floor, and shot a hook shot from out of bounds in front of the spectators. The referees were so stunned, they didn't call it a violation out of bounds. They let it count as 2 points. But that did happen, and it was the beginning of their professional career, because at that time, there had been a presentation to the school board here at Waterloo about a 7-game stand against the New York Celtics, now the Boston Celtics. It was presented to the school board, but the school board did not allow it and would not support it. So when they went down that gold medal tournament, they were offered $100 to play in that tournament down there against some pretty good teams. And Magellan and Harrison took them down there, and they did awfully well, but in covering their expenses, they were defined as professionals and no longer amateurs. And that day began their barnstorming careers. You know, it's so very difficult to separate fact from fiction concerning these guys. I've read books, and like to say I played against them. And in 1975, Bob Evans, the sausage entrepreneur, we have our Civil War annual bean dinner the second Saturday of August every year, and we're having 150 with it this year. And we honored the Waterloo Wonders, and I was the master of ceremonies, as I've been for several decades. And we brought in Dave Dials. I don't know if you know who that is, but he was in charge of the Prudential College scoreboard on national television on Saturdays. He came in and brought certificates from the General Assembly here in Ohio and gave them to each Waterloo Wonder back in 1975. And that's where I got to meet and talk at length to a real character named Orland Roberts. And I'll never forget what happened that day. But to start this scenario, I have been told by many people that Waterloo High School began in 1916, and that it was held on the second floor of Brown's General Store, what was known as the Lodge Hall. And it was a 2-year academy at that time. You did not go 4 years. And in the graduating class were 16 girls and 1 boy. Well, we had no boys basketball. That one guy can't play them all. But we did have girls basketball. It started shortly after that. But as more boys came to school there, they started playing on an outdoor court behind the school. Yellow clay dirt there, drooping baskets. Now, I remember when I played, we would buy cotton gloves in the wintertime, cut the fingers out so we could feel the ball and play out there, shovel snow away and things such as that. But to play outdoors like that, it had to be pretty tough, since there was no place to go unless you went to Aid or Cadmus. I've also been told that to go play on an indoor court like that, for those boys who came to Wonders, meant a 10-mile walk to and fro. What people don't understand, because they didn't live at that time, is this is the year of the Great Depression. It began in October 1929 and ended when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we put people to work as soldiers. But to go to Ironton was like going to Europe today. Times were very, very tough. It's also inconceivable that most people sold tickets to see the Wonders play for 15 cents. I know one school wanted to make some money for their treasury, so they chose to sell tickets for 45 cents for reserve seats and 35 cents for general admission. But then, when it got cold and the weather was inclement, too cold to play outside, they went to a barn owned by John Malone. They played in a few other haylofts. And what they did was very ingenious. I've often wanted to say that deprivation breeds ingenuity. And in that hayloft up there, they got an old iron wagon wheel and used it as a goal to shoot at. You know that. They didn't have a basketball, but they asked their mothers, sisters, aunts for rags, for socks, shirt sleeves, things such as that. And they would meld them together in the size of a basketball and then tie them with strings. And in that hayloft, they'd take lanterns and put around the periphery of the hayloft. And they imagined and dreamed that the bales of hay there were spectators at the state tournament. And they would pass the nights away passing that ball and dreaming that they might someday go all the way. You can't dribble a cloth ball, it will not bounce. So they passed it very fast and very hard. That's where they learned their passing drill, so it is said. I was not, of course, alive then. And then he came, and I think the more I hear and read about Magellan Harrison, he was a very special, extraordinary man. But you know, jealousy does rear its ugly head anywhere there's great success in our world. He was here 3 different times. And what's amazing, I do not want to throw out anything to you that may have conjecture tied around his neck. What's amazing is he did not lose a home game in 11 years where he coached. Now, he was a coach at Aid, Waterloo, coached the Windsor Dukes, and his last coaching stint was at Chesapeake Junior Varsity. Didn't lose a home game. Now, they said you could comfortably put 300 people in the Waterloo gym. I've been in there, but I really don't know how many were seated. Sometimes, when they got rolling, there was 500 people in there, and it was loud. The cheerleaders didn't have to ask for the additional noise. They won 56 straight games before they lost. And boy, is that a story. 56 straight. Now, according to Jim Walker and other people I've talked to, and I counted the games that we had scores for Waterloo last night. And I counted 90 games in 2 high school seasons. But all the records say unofficially they played 100 games and finished the 2-year sequence at 97-3. I'd like to tell you why they lost those 3 games. They went to a place called Greenfield McLean. They had not lost a ball game in their high school career playing for Magellan Harrison. They went there, but they went rabbit hunting the day of the game at 7 o'clock a.m. A party of 16 of them went out. And 2 of the players waged bets on who could kill the most rabbits. Wyman Roberts laughed at him, and he killed some rabbits by throwing rocks at him. He killed them with rocks. But they would take their shotguns and rifles and go rabbit hunting. Well, they went to the ball game, and they made no excuses, and the game was very close. And in the last minute, Wyman Roberts shot one of those patented 2-hand set shots from Coffin Corner. And it went in, tying the game, and what the Waterloo Wonders stopped, sending it into overtime. But the referees blew that whistle, and they said, a fan standing on the floor had touched the ball as it went toward the basket. The basket be disallowed. The game was over. Waterloo has lost 26-24. Now, the reason that happened, if it did, was that there was 1,300 people in that gym. There was not room for them to sit down, and hardly room to take the ball out of bounds. And somebody reached up and touched that ball. Well, you know, a lot of people were shocked that they did lose there. They would lose 2 more. They went to a place called Franklin to play. Franklin had only lost 1 game to the Middletown Middies, a Class A school. And a strange thing happened there. Magellan Harrison, he had to be just a super basketball coach. He took his shortest player, Stuart Wiseman, at 5'7", put him in the pivot against this big, tall, lanky guy like me, skinny, long arms and legs, thinking, you know, if we got rid of him early, that they would have no trouble. Well, Stuart Wiseman had an off night, and he missed every shot he put up because he tried to shoot underneath the arms of the pivot man instead of go around it, or draw fouls. Well, something I never told you, which is shocking to me, is that it is said that Magellan Harrison drove his own car and took the team to the games, a V8 Ford, a black roadster. And when you got in that car, there's a seating arrangement, just like in homeroom in high school. Magellan Harrison will drive. Kenneth McCauley will ride shotgun with his scorebook and his personal equipment. In the middle will be one of the taller players, McMahon or Orland Roberts. And in the back there will be three players, three of the smaller players, because not as much room in the back. Now it was an everyday assignment that Burl Drummond, who weighed less than any of the others, would lie down on the feet of the three players in the back seat. That was his place to be. And the coach would drive him to the games. Now, it's also pretty well agreed upon that on long-distance trips like the Lima, like the Painesville, like the Cleveland, like the Cincinnati and Columbus, didn't take the reserves or substitutes, just took the fabulous five, Kenneth McCauley. If it were a local game, they would take the cheerleaders and some other people in a volunteer car. But Mr. Magellan Harrison would drive that car. He would keep up the expenses on it, pay for the fuel of it, all these things out of his own pocket, because he loved those boys. Now, I might say what basketball was like at that time. There was Class A and Class B schools. 1,600 schools in the state of Ohio, little schools. 1/3 of them, or 500 of them, were Class B schools. And Waterloo would win the Class B championship 2 years in a row, 1934 and 1935. Only one school in Ohio history had ever won consecutive state championships as a Class B school, and that was Bell Point, who won in 1924 and 25. Now, what made you a Class B school? You had to have under 150 boys enrolled in your 4 grades of the high school. When Burl Drummond left Cadmus and came here, he was the 26th boy in the student body. 26. I saw on the news just 2 nights ago when they touted New Boston, that New Boston has less than 50 boys in their high school, and are planning and hoping to go to the state. So New Boston might go, but the Waterloo Wonders went. Now, prior to them, only Proctorville and Rome had ever gone to the state tournament from Lawrence County. Since then, many have gone, but no one has won it twice in a row. Those fabulous 5 played on that outdoor court, played in hay-lofts, hiked thumb to Cadmus, which had a gymnasium. But then Waterloo High School was opened in 1929 as a place for higher education. And then they gave them a gymnasium, which they played in 1933, 34, 34, and 35. Now, Magellan Harrison would take them back to the state tournament in 1941. But as Carl York used to say so often, didn't have the horses that he. Waterloo also produced a player later on named Wayne Wiseman. He went to Rio Grande, where I went. He made the success of a man named Bevo Francis by getting him the ball. And Wayne just passed away. Waterloo boy, they called him Wayne the Wonder up at the University of Rio Grande. A couple unbelievable things that struck me was that they had, when they played these games, some of them were high school games. And they started playing the second year against Class A teams. Ashland, Portsmouth, Cincinnati Xavier, Springfield Public, Columbus Central. Big schools, a lot bigger than Waterloo. They would also play exhibition games, they called them there, against non-high school teams. And then, of course, they would play as professionals, as I said, later on. And then in their waning years, some of them played semi-pro ball. But they were going to Painesville High, that's up in the Cleveland region. And of course, Coach got his car ready to go, got them assembled there, no substitutes. And they drove up there, and 50 miles below Columbus, they ran into a snowstorm. And a defroster broke. And they stopped and called Painesville and said, look, we don't know if we can get there or not. The weather's bad, the defroster won't work. We may not be able to come. So, oh, please come, we'll wait on you. And the players took turns lighting matches on the windshield so Magellan Harrison could see to get from Columbus to Painesville. They got there at 1 o'clock in the morning. Very few had ever left. And they put on their passing wizardry. Their philosophy was kind of strange, I thought. In the first quarter, a lot of times, they would fall behind on purpose just to watch and see what the other team was going to do as their game plan. Because if a team has success in basketball, it'll show you everything it's going to do just to pound you. In the second quarter, they would power on. Waterloo would. In the third quarter, they would increase their scores. And sometimes in the fourth quarter, all they would do was put on a passing show. They wouldn't even attempt to score. And I tell you about that game up at Franklin there. Strange thing happened there. This Burl Drummond, they said, was faster than lightning. They called him for running 3 times. We call it walking today. It's a turnover. They called it running because he was so fast the referees weren't sure whether he did create a violation or not. And then Orland Roberts, like I said, that's the one I got to know really well. Orland had been cutting wood for his family before they went on that road trip. He cut his hand with an axe, but he still went on a road trip and he still played. He played 3 quarters, and the pain, the bleeding was so bad, he came out. And Waterloo played that Franklin team with 4 against 5 and lost by 11 points, 36-25. No excuses, didn't have any substitutes. Orland was in pain. And then I recall the mighty savage contest they had against the Ironton Tigers. First time they played Ironton, and they called them charity games. If you come to see them, pay money, take the money, and buy clothing for indigent children in the Ironton area. So they played a charity game, and Waterloo beat Ironton. But Ironton would never forget that. And they said, come on back, let's play again. So they went to Ironton to play, and the man who refereed the game refereed some of my high school games there. Probably some of you knew Harold Boob Roth. And they played, and Magellan Harrison, I had his quote at home, he said, it wasn't a basketball game. They grabbed us, they shoved us, they held on to us, they pushed us. But they were great football players. One of them was Lefty McAfee. And Ironton beat them 23-18 in a charity basketball game. Well, you'd think the Wonders might be upset or something because they lost 2 games in just a few days. But Mr. Rolfe, the referee, thought he would be criticized because of the roughness of the game. And 45 minutes after he came out of the locker room, having showered and dressed, there's the Waterloo Wonders sitting on tables in the corridor of the hallway of Ironton High School eating ice cream. And something about the Waterloo Wonders. They'll stay and talk to the last coach, fan, player, family member wants to talk. They won't walk away. They're courteous and kind. Magellan Harrison made sure they respected their fellow men and that they had manners. When I was a coach at the University of Rio Grande, I was teaching history one day, and a varsity coach walked in. And right in front of the class, he put his arm around me and said, big man, got to ask you to do something for me. And I knew it was going to be bad when he talked like that. He said, seems like I've scheduled 2 games the same night. And I said, well, that's too bad. He said, well, I'll go play Moorhead, but you got to go play Wilberforce. I said, my team turned in their equipment 2 weeks ago. He said, we haven't practiced, so I don't know where the boys are. Big man, you know, they hug you when they want stuff. You've got to go do this. So I ran over to the cafeteria and I looked for my players there. I even dressed the manager that night, and guys who played intramural ball. If you've been to Wilberforce, that's a cultural experience in itself. And I went up there in that airplane hangar, and we played. We got beat 84-80 with a bunch of walk-ons, a manager, and intramural players. and they really got dusted down at Moorhead. But Magellan Harrison made a mistake of scheduling 2 games one night. But when you play 5 times a week and travel to Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati, you know it's bound to overlap. So they had a game against Chesapeake and Jackson the same night. So the game started at Waterloo at 7 o'clock. The Fabulous Five played the first half, ran up an unbelievable score. And I bet the reserves were so happy that night because they didn't go on trips unless it was a league game or within 20 miles of Waterloo. They didn't go. But they got to play that night a whole half. And when it was over, Waterloo had beat Chesapeake 53-5. Now, Coach Harrison and the Fabulous Five, they left at halftime, put on those warm-ups, and drove to Jackson. They played Jackson, beat them 45-24. 2 games, 1 night, and the reserves were so happy. But it's interesting how they got their name. You know, there are 10 Waterloos in this world. 2 of them are in Canada, 1 of them's in Australia, main one in Belgium, New York, Illinois, Iowa. And when the Waterloo started making their splash, the Tribune or local newspapers didn't think much of it here because it's a Class B school, or they're playing Class B schools the first year. Didn't think much about it at all. But yet, when they won that state championship there, northern newspapers called them the Little Generals, because the community of Waterloo takes its name from that battle site in Belgium where Napoleon was beaten June 18, 1815 by Blucher and Wellington, the Prussians, and the Englishmen. Very famous battle in world history. Well, not only did Waterloo Wonders play high school teams, Class A and B, charity games, exhibition games, but they played college teams when they were in high school. They played the Marshall Freshmen in January 1934. Now, Marshall didn't want to lose to a bunch of high school boys, so they brought down some varsity players. Went up to Huntington to play them, beat Marshall 6 points. Well, the Iron Tribune sports editor, a man named Stan Morris, he went to the game. He had a photography shop here in Ironton, and he was just so overwhelmed that they beat Marshall freshmen and some varsity members that he said it was a wonder it happened. And he gave the name Wonders. And they did not have an official school nickname until January 1934, when it became the Waterloo Wonders. Now, as you sit here and think about these teams around today, they're either named after animals, insects, or collective peoples. But maybe Waterloo was the first in Lawrence County ever to be named after an inanimate thing, a wonder. And it is a wonder that they had done that. And I'll conclude by telling you these 2 stories here. It was March 1959, March 11th. Dick Burdett, the guy who wrote that book on the Waterloo Wonders, came to Waterloo. He wanted to see some of these Waterloo Wonders, this Waterloo he'd heard about. And he drove through it, ended up in Gallia County before he knew he'd been in it. So he turned around and came back and started knocking on doors. And he was told where the Roberts boys lived. He went up to Orrin Roberts' house and knocked on a door. Orrin was sitting here strumming a guitar. Orrin asked him what he wanted. He told him. He gave him a cup of coffee. And he said, let's go get my cousin, Wyman. Wyman was cutting weeds that day and didn't seem too interested, but when he mentioned basketball, he perked up. So they walked to the Waterloo gym. I've been in that gym there. Our Masonic Lodge used to gather there. And I've been in that gym as they had. And what surprised me, there's a steel beam across the width of the gym to support the building. And at the top was a triangular steel configuration there. They put on their tennis shoes, walked to the gym with Dick Burnett, and he swears that they stepped back to the foul line. That gym was so small it had overlapping half-court lines. Not the foul line 15 feet away, the one on the other end. And they stood there and took turns shooting over the beam through the triangular configuration, and each Roberts boy made 7 straight baskets from the opposite foul line before either one of them missed. That's 1959. They weren't playing ball anymore. Frank Jenkins did the same thing with him, the barber. He would go and let Oral Roberts shoot, he'd keep feeding him the ball. But when you shoot hook shots from the corner falling out of bounds, and Oral Roberts played in Madison Square Garden, the thing that ended their career was World War II. Every one of them went to the service. But Kurt McMahon, the high school All-American, the captain of the Waterloo Wonders, was rejected for a bad heart. Orland Roberts played for the armed services, played in Madison Square Garden. And when they had movies at that time, they would have short selections prior to the main films. And they had a selection of Orland Roberts shooting a hook shot from half court, and it showed all over the United States. And those guys in the service that played ball with him said, "I know that guy, I played with that guy." In the spring of 1934, Converse tennis shoes came to Waterloo High School, said, "We want to do a movie about you wonders." Well, it was so dark in that little gym, they took the baskets outside, and they were shirts and skins, and they played each other, and that movie was shown all over the United States prior to the main features in movie theaters. So they were quite famous. At that reunion we had at Bob Evans' farm, as I said, I was a master of ceremonies. I was nervous, scared, worried. I planned the program. I didn't know how it was going to go. Over 1,000 people there to come to see the Wonders, not Bob